Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 of the look at the PlayStation Vita versus the Sega Dreamcast. And for this episode, we're taking a look at Dreamcast games on the Vita. So sometimes we see games on the Vita that are also available on the Dreamcast. They got there by various means. Some of them may have been direct ports, some of them may simply be multi-platform games where back in the days we saw a PlayStation 1 version. It happens to be also there was a Dreamcast release, and that PlayStation 1 game is also available on the PlayStation Vita because of digital distribution. So I took a look at the Dreamcast games that were released and see which ones were actually multi-platform releases where we have seen it on the PlayStation 1, and take a look to see as far as others to where they may have found their way to the Vita by potentially other means, such as the PlayStation Portable or simply a port. So starting off on the list, we're going with Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. Now, back when this came out on the Dreamcast, this game was a terrific survival horror game that was really gave the Resident Evil series a run for its money when it came out on the Dreamcast. I thought the graphics were gorgeous. It really had that sense of, I guess, terror, perhaps, and just really great controls. It was a fantastic game. You know, it was released on digital distribution through the PlayStation Network. However, it's only on the PS3 and the PSP. So unless you have a hacked Vita to where you can play games that have been blocked off that are only on PSP, you're not going to be able to play that on the Vita. Next game is Army Men Sarge's Heroes. So this was kind of like the old school Play With Your Army Men game. The series had many releases going back several generations. However, we've not seen a release for it, and unfortunately there is not a digital version of it on the PlayStation Network. So unless you know some way to rip it and playing the ROM on the Vita, there's no real way to do it. Next game is Capcom vs. SNK. Now, this game was a fantastic fighter on the Dreamcast. It saw subsequent releases with Capcom vs. SNK Pro and Capcom vs. SNK 2. Both the latter were only in Japan. However, we saw Capcom vs. SNK on the Dreamcast as well as the PlayStation 1. However, it's not available on the PlayStation Network. So yet again, if you can hack your system, perhaps you can get the ROM to play. The next game is actually a 2-for-1, so we're looking at Crazy Taxi and Crazy Taxi 2. Both fantastic Naomi ports to the Dreamcast. Sega made games, found their way easily at home on the Dreamcast. Now, there was not a port on the PlayStation 1. However, there was Crazy Taxi Fair Wars on the PlayStation Portable. And so, however, just because it's playable on the PlayStation Portable, it does not make it available for the PlayStation Vita unless you have a hacked system. So, that is the only way to get it. Next one is Dave Mirra's BMX Freestyles. So this was one of the, back when the extreme sports games were a lot more popular, that was one of the releases. Unfortunately, as can be expected for a lot of licensed properties, these licenses only last so long. So Dave Mirra didn't give his blessing to last forever, and so there is not a Dave Mirra game available on the PlayStation Network. So yet again, hack Vita, roll the dice. Next game is Dino Crisis. So I know I've been pretty negative so far with regards to discussing games available, but Dino Crisis is available on the Vita. So granted though, this is based upon the PlayStation 1 port versus the Dreamcast version. So if you play the Dreamcast version, the graphics looked a lot better. You're going to be downgraded to PS1 graphics playing on the Vita. So it's a taste of Dino Crisis on the go, but not necessarily as good as the Dreamcast version. Now, next one is Disney's Dinosaurs. So this is one where there's not a version of it on the PlayStation Network, so you can hack your system and give it a chance. Same thing with Donald Duck's Going Quackers. So this is actually a Dreamcast game, which is also available on the PlayStation 1, and then also there was, I believe, a GameCube version as well. But nothing on digital distribution for this game either. ECW Anarchy Rules. This is another wrestling game that came out on the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 1. But the ECW is going to be licensed athletes and such, so unfortunately those licenses don't last forever. And the same thing goes for ECW Hardcore Revolution, another Dreamcast and PS1 release, but yet again is not available on digital distribution either. Evil Dead. So there was Evil Dead game came on the Dreamcast, so I played it hoping to have some sort of experience similar to, I don't know, maybe like a Alone in the Dark or Resident Evil, and graphically it looked pretty good, but the controls weren't as good, and some of the gameplays kind of suffered for it, so it kind of got mediocre reviews for it. Unfortunately, the Evil Dead series, just like any other licensed property, those licenses don't last forever. It's not on the PlayStation Network. Going ahead, Frogger 2, Swampy's Revenge. So this is a fun little platformer on the Dreamcast, which was also the PS1. And even though there are other Frogger games on the PlayStation Network, this one is not on there. Next one is Fatal Fury Mark of the Wolves, also known as Garo Mark of the Wolves. So this game was on the Dreamcast, however there was no PS1 or PSP release. However, there was a Vita port. I believe there was a physical distribution by Limited Run Games. So Fatal Fury was, a masterpiece for its time and definitely saw its way onto the Vita. Next game is Gauntlet Legends. So this is a Dreamcast game, also on the PS1. Unfortunately, the Gauntlet IP has probably passed a couple of times. Is not available on digital distribution either. Next game is Grand Theft Auto 2. You figured Grand Theft Auto would probably be on everything, however, for some reason, I guess Rockstar doesn't want to try and make some money off of it on the digital storefront, so it's not available on digital distribution. Next one's Hydro Thunder. This was a great arcade game, definitely a lot of fun. It was a reboot of it on the Xbox 360. I think it was called Hydro Thunder Hurricane or something like that. I don't really remember it, but definitely improved graphics and a lot of fun. However, unfortunately, the PS1 port never made its way to the Vita. Next game, Jeremy McGrath Supercross. Similar to Dave Mirra, it's a licensed game. Definitely Jeremy McGrath was not going to give his likeness and his permission indefinitely, so definitely not available on the PlayStation Network to download for the Vita. Next game, Jet Set Radio. So when we saw it in North America, it was Jet Grind Radio, same game series, so it was released as Jet Set Radio Future in other territories. This game actually got an honest-to-goodness Vita port, so great game, very polished, and definitely was one of the highlight games of the Dreamcast, and found its way to the Vita. My only disappointment with it is the fact that I never got a physical release, and I like physicals. So definitely, if you want a quality port on the go, definitely take a look at Jet Set Radio for the Vita. Next game is King of Fighters Dream Match 99. So technically, this did not get ported over. This game did come out on the Vita. on the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 1. However, there was a PSP release of King of Fighters Collection, the Orochi Saga. However, it's only available on PSP, so unless you have a hacked Vita, you probably won't be able to play it. Next was King of Fighters Evolution. So it's listed as King of Fighters 99, however, it has the same cover art. So technically, when King of Fighters 99 came out on the Dreamcast, it was actually 98, and King of Fighters Evolution was 99. However, for essentially what's King of Fighters Evolution on the Dreamcast, was the PS1 port listed as King of Fighters 99. It's on the PlayStation Network, and you can play it on the PSP and on the Vita. Granted, it's probably not going to look just as good as the Dreamcast version, but odds are that it's probably really limited as far as the difference goes. Now, those of you who have tried every iteration, you can feel free to comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. However, it's a 2D fighter, so it wasn't nearly as polished as a game like Capcom vs. SNK in the art department. So probably going to be pretty safe as far as picking this up for the Vita. Next game is Last Blade 2. Another SNK fighter like the King of Fighters series. So this game, similar to Fatal Fury Mark of the Wolves, was another one that actually got a direct port to the Vita, similarly, and not a PlayStation 1 version. Actually, the only Last Blade game on PS1 is actually the original Last Blade. They never had Last Blade 2, at least that I'm aware of. And I believe also Limited Run Games also did a physical distribution, I believe. So definitely something to look forward to. Next game is Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. I really enjoy this game. Back in the Dreamcast days, if there was a game released on the PlayStation 1 and also on the Dreamcast, I was a bit hesitant to pick it up on the Dreamcast in case some of these publishers were lazy and just simply did a really, crappy port. Because the Dreamcast really could do some beautiful, beautiful things. You take a look at games like Jet Grind Radio, Shenmue. But I was impressed. It was a pretty good game. Definitely not nearly as polished as a strictly made for Dreamcast game, but it was a great game and a great story. It was released on PS1 as originally, like I said. However, it's available on digital distribution on the PSP, so Hacked Vita might be able to play the game. Next game is Looney Tunes Space Race. So this game was on the Dreamcast and on the PS1, and surprisingly, just like some other franchises, I guess the publishers don't want to or can't license it for digital distribution. So this game it's one of these games where perhaps for a hack system with ROM could probably play it, but unfortunately it's not available for purchase. Another game, sadly, Marvel vs. Capcom. So with Disney's purchase of the Marvel Studios, this game probably would have been available back in the days for digital purchase. However, that is no longer the case anymore, and it's unfortunate. Next game, Matt Hoffman Pro BMX. Yet another licensed individual to where they're not going to be able to do that indefinitely, so not available on digital distribution. Next game is Mr. Driller, and unfortunately, this is a Namco game. They own the game property. It's sad that it's on the PlayStation 1 on the Dreamcast. It makes sense to be able to have this released. It's not a really taxing game for the Vita hardware to play, but they didn't release it, so perhaps the hack community might be lucky. Next game is Namco Museum Volume 1. So this was on the PlayStation 1 and on the Dreamcast. There was no Volume 2 or Volume 3 like some of the other Namco Museum games on PS1. However, it is available for the Vita. You can download it. So I wouldn't expect anything as far as any enhancements, but these are really old games, so it'll probably load up just fine pretty quickly. Next one's NBA Hoops. It was released in the PS1. This was a midway game, probably similar to like NBA Jam if you've played those games. And so that game came out, and unfortunately, the NBA series is something to where Midway doesn't have that property anymore, so there's no way to see that game on digital distribution. The same thing goes for NBA Showtime on NBC. So that was one to where it's like another NBA Jam type game, a lot of fun. However, NBC, the NBA, yet another midway game to where they're not going to have the license from NBC or the NBA, so definitely not going to find that for the Vita to play, at least by regular means. Next one, NFL Blitz 2000 and NFL Blitz 2001. This is one to where EA has a license, however, it's surprising they didn't bother to release it, because I know there's NFL Blitz available for the PS3. It's an enhanced version, just like they did with NBA Jam on Fire Edition. However, sadly, they didn't release the PS1 ports to make it available for those who want to play on the Vita, or even for the PSP for that matter. Next game is Nightmare Creatures 2. So this game came on the PS1 and on the Dreamcast. I played on the Dreamcast. Gosh, that game was such a headache. It was a really poor experience. I think I probably could have played something else, had a better time, but I thought to myself, it's a hack and slash game. I want to kind of give it a chance. And usually when I start a game, I want to try to finish it. So I eventually made it through. I'm not going to lose any sleep that it's not available on the PlayStation Network. I'm never planning to play the game again. However, for those of you hoping to play it, only perhaps by other means. So, next game, it's a twofer. It's Power Stone 1 and Power Stone 2. Two great arcade beat-em-ups that were on the Dreamcast. Similar in the same vein as far as a Super Smash Brothers style party game. Those are available, thankfully, on the Vita. So it came out as Power Stone Collection on the PlayStation Portable, and thankfully, Capcom found it in their wisdom to make it available for the Vita. So go ahead and pick it up. great value for your money. I mean, it's probably like a $5-10 game on the PlayStation Network. If you try to find the physical versions, if you don't own it already on the Dreamcast, you're probably going to be paying over $100 to try to pick up both games. So definitely worth picking up to pick it up and play on the go. Next game is Rainbow Six. So this is available for the Vita to play. However, Rainbow Six Rogue Spear, which was another PS1 Dreamcast port just like Rainbow Six, is not available for some weird reason. So I'm not sure why. I thought both games were pretty good experiences to play on the Dreamcast. However, I guess, it's unfortunate really because the Vita doesn't have a lot of shooters. And definitely the Rainbow Six series is a great series. So it's unfortunate that only Rainbow Six made but not Rogue Spear. Next game is Rayman 2. So definitely a great platformer on the Dreamcast. Granted, though, it's not going to look as good on the PlayStation 1 port that we've come about back in the days. However, for those wanting to have the Rayman 2 experience, it's available on the PlayStation Network to play for the Vita. Next game is Revolt. So this is an arcade type racer. This game is not available on the PlayStation Network, so perhaps hacked means might be able to allow you to play it on the go. Next one's Ready to Rumble Boxing, Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2. Sadly, those were fun games on the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 1. However, they didn't make it for digital distribution. So that's another one to perhaps hack systems might be able to play it. I have no idea. So do your homework if that's something that you really have a heart for. It's really too bad because it's not like there's a lot of boxing games on the Vita. If anything, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 indie games. And back in the days, we used to see a lot more boxing games, especially from EA, which sadly didn't do much as far as support for the Vita. Next one is, thankfully, some good news, Resident Evil 2. So granted, though, Resident Evil 2 on the Dreamcast looked a lot better than its PlayStation 1 original version. However, it's going to be based upon the PS1 version, but at least you can play it on the go, along with Resident Evil 3. So that's a bit of good news. So you can play Resident Evil 2 and 3 on the go. Sadly, though, Resident Evil Code Veronica never got a port over to the Vita. It wasn't, it was a great game on the Dreamcast. However, it never made its way over. So, which is to be expected. So Resident Evil Code Veronica, unfortunately, there's just no way to play it on the Dreamcast. I'm sorry, on the Vita. Next game is Shadow Man. So this was another PS1 Dreamcast game, and this was one that unfortunately it's not available for digital distribution. So for those of you that really like the game, it had some interesting qualities to it. So unfortunately, it's something that just simply did not carry on into future generations. Next game is South Park Chef's Love Shack. So this game came out on PS1. However, it's not gone further. It's not available on the PlayStation Network, as well as South Park Rally, yet another PS1 game and Dreamcast game that didn't make it further along into PlayStation Network. Star Wars Demolition. So this is a game on Dreamcast and PS1. This is another game not available on PlayStation Network, as well as Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles. This is actually too bad, just because it would have been really nice to have seen an enhanced version of a Star Wars game available for the Vita. However, unfortunately, there's not much as far as Star Wars games to play on the Vita. Next game is Street Fighter Alpha 3. So, unlike the Dreamcast, so we had Street Fighter Alpha 3 on the Dreamcast, there was Street Fighter Alpha 3 on the PS1. Vita owners actually get to have 2 experiences. So they can either play the PS1 port, or they can play Street Fighter 3 Max. So 2 different options to have Street Fighter Alpha 3 play on the go. So definitely, Vita fans, this is a 2-for-1 special. However, so far we've gone through quite a bit of games with very little available to play on the Vita straight up from the Dreamcast library. Next one is Striker Pro 2000. This is a soccer game, and so another issue is probably going to be licensing as far as teams, clubs, and players. So definitely not available to play on the Vita, even though it was available on PS1. Next game is Test Drive 6. So this was a pretty competent racer for the time. Had a PS1 port besides the Dreamcast version. However, it's not available on PlayStation Network. And neither is Test Drive Le Mans. So that was a pretty good racer for its time on the Dreamcast. And it didn't make its way over. Yet another piece of bad news. Tony Hawk Pro Skater both 1 and 2, which came out on Dreamcast and the PS1, did not find its way to the PlayStation Network, which is really too bad just because Activision still has Tony Hawk Pro Skater as a series. Grant though, not as many releases have been coming out this generation. I believe there was only one on the PS4 and Xbox One. However, Tony Hawk's still licensed, so why they don't have this available to play for the Vita is besides me. I have no idea, just because a good skating game would go a long way for the Dreamcast. I'm sorry, for the Vita. Let's see, Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear. So that was available on the Dreamcast and the PS1, and thankfully this is a game that's actually available that you can download to play for the Vita. No hacking, no nothing, just pay for it and go. So one piece of good news. And the next game is UFC. So Ultimate Fighting Championship has found its way into various publishers' hands. So the original one that came out on the Dreamcast and PS1 is no longer available. EA now has this property. They did not have it back then when the first one was made. So that's not available, unfortunately. Vanishing Point. This was an interesting racing game. Was on the Dreamcast and PS1. It is not available for the PlayStation Network. Along with Vigilante 8 Second Offense. Another game to where it's been lost to time, not available on PlayStation Network. Next game, Virtua Tennis and Virtua Tennis 2. So there was a PSP port of Virtua Tennis 2. Unfortunately, as far as that game goes, it is not available on digital distribution. It may have been back in the days. I'm not entirely sure. If you do know, please post. I'd love to know whether or not that was available once upon a time. I'm sure for those who are crafty enough, they could probably get some way to be able to play the Virtua Tennis series from the Dreamcast on the Vita via the PSP, but not something that we can easily do by just simply shopping by normal means. The Worms series. Sadly, there were two Worms games on the Dreamcast with Worms Armageddon and Worms World Party. However, those games, which were also on the PS1, have not made it to the PlayStation Network for Vita fans to be able to enjoy. So you are out of luck. Next is WWF Attitude, along with WWF Royal Rumble. So yet again, WWF, those are licensed games, and they were by Acclaim, if I remember correctly. And those games, Acclaim is no longer available. It's no longer a publisher. And so those games are kind of lost to time. Perhaps hackers can find a way to play it on the Vita, but that's not something that's available. So, unfortunately, 248 possible Dreamcast games. There were about 64 games that were ported over. 63. However, of those, only about 14 or so are available just to be able to go to the PlayStation Network and download. So, for those with more crafty means, you might be able to get about 50 more games through hacking means, but that's up to you. There's a lot of legalities involved with that. However, you're taking a look. I was kind of hoping to be more Dreamcast presence on the Vita. Unfortunately, it's not. So it just goes to show how viable the Dreamcast is, just because so many games, the best versions were on the Dreamcast, and they have not been succeeded on future platforms. So hopefully you learned a lot. If you're curious about playing more Dreamcast games on the Vita, who knows? There's a lot of games coming out for digital distribution. That's kind of the way things are going for future generations. So we might eventually see some of these games that are no longer available or have never been available perhaps come back. So we might see, perhaps another publisher come and obtain those rights and publish it. So hopefully you learned something. I know I definitely learned a lot on making this video. This is Kermit the Gaming Hermit. If you like what you saw, go ahead and subscribe and click the bell for notifications. I'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by, Dreamcast and Vita fans. Take it easy.